Hey, hello, everyone. Hello, Nadine. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I want to welcome everyone to the 5, 8.5, your midweek break. I'm Lisa Graves, and you know the routine: 5 stories, 8 minutes each, and a chance to refuel. We slow things down to sip, reflect, remember. You are not alone. Yeah.
You are not alone. Although I feel like you have been alone. I feel like I've been away for 2 weeks now.
You've been traveling. I've missed you, but Greg did a great job. But missed you, Nadine. I hope your travels went well.
I spent a week in the mountains of Idaho Falls, which is perhaps was an interesting time to be on the border of Utah and Idaho. Sort of camping with mountain men, but everyone, it was not without trepidation, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. How about you? You've been traveling too, haven't you?
I have been traveling. What people don't know is that before we start this show, Nadine and I sometimes sing to each other little snippets of songs. And today, Nadine was singing the song from Joan Osborne, "What If God Was One of Us?" And then I said, "Oh, I have a funny story from my recent travels." And so we thought we'd share it with you. So I got to clear my throat.
It's very sweet that we sing to each other, by the way.
Yeah, it's a big buildup. But anyway, so Nadine was singing "What If God Were One of Us?" And I said, oh, I forgot about what happened on this trip. So I was coming back home, and I was waiting for an upgrade based on miles. And I looked at the upgrade list of who was near on standby, and I saw that God was on standby. I got the proof right here. I don't know if I can show it into the camera, but this was the little sheet. It said God, G. And so I wrote my friend and said, "Send prayers and positive vibes for my flight." Nadine, upon hearing this story, said, "Couldn't you just lean over?"
Yes, that's right. Well, see, listen, this is what makes it even creepier, is that we have anyone who's been following the rapture that was supposed to happen yesterday knows that a lot of people have taken it very seriously. And a lot of people have not taken it seriously. But if ever there was a time to be on a plane next to God, it would be rapture. It would be the rapture.
So here's the thing. So I'm watching to see if I ever get, on the upgrade list. Anyway, I'm standing in line getting ready to board. And I realized that I did get upgraded, and that God got upgraded too, and was supposed to sit across from me. And so I was, eagerly awaiting the Supreme Being's arrival. And I get on the plane, and there's no one sitting next to me. It's empty. The 2 seats next to me are empty. And, I'm thinking maybe that's as it should be. I don't know. I don't want to question these things. So I'm waiting. And finally, right as they're getting ready to close the doors, this guy walks on, and he walks down the aisle, and he sits down next to me, but not in the seat number that was assigned to God. He sits next to the seat that was assigned to God. So then I'm really, really intrigued about what's happening. And I eventually say to him, are you God? And he says to me, he looked at me like I had horns or something, which I don't really want God to have that perspective, right? And he says, "My name is Godfried." And I was like, "Oh," and he said, "They abbreviate the upgrade list to the first 3 letters of your name." And I said, "I forgot." I was so stunned by the possibilities. So anyway, that's the story. That's what happened to me in recent weeks. And the flight worked out well. And Mr. Godfried seemed like a perfectly nice person.
If I were him, anytime someone approached me, I would say, "Yes, my child." I would just I would just mess with people. But yeah,
Yes,
what if God was one of us? This feels like a country song. God
yes.
was waiting for an upgrade on the red eye from Dallas
Yes,
to
who could
invite all the passengers to his golden palace.
oh, no,
All right.
the rhyme.
Okay.
That's
We'll
right,
work
but
on that.
that does remind me of that great movie, Michael, with John Travolta, and,
Oh, yeah.
Andie MacDowell, where she sings songs about, country songs, and she
Yeah.
sings the famous pie song, "Pie, Pie, Me, Oh, My," one of the best songs about pie ever. I don't know how many songs there are about pie, but that's number one for me. So, yeah. So you all don't know this. We're so glad you're here. Please subscribe. Please, like, you get,
Oh, yeah.
actual conversation about what's happening in the world and what's happening in our world. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So that happened. What about you, Nadine?
Well, as I said, I went camping for a week in the mountains of Idaho, and this is something some people will not know about me, but one of my favorite TV shows is the show Alone, particularly because the women who go on this survival challenge alone in the wilderness and have to do all of their filming are such amazing people. And I got to know one of the winners, and I got taught archery by one of the women who was almost made it to the end. Anyway, so it was a lot of fun, and it's the kind of thing that I do to relax. And a friend of mine, someone I work with, said, "So you're going to take your vacation time to go sleep on the ground in the cold in Idaho, of all places." And I said, there is something about being in nature that is a reset. And I think part of it is that nature does not care about your age, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your religious affiliation. It will treat you and all comers the same. And there is just something that it lifts a lot of burden to be in a space, to sleep under the stars, and to have quiet at night, and just to be more aware of the fact that we're animals on a planet. And boy, did I need a reset after the weeks, the month that we've had.
The
So
month in a week, the month in a day. Yeah. There's actually
yeah,
a story in the New York Times today, by I think Rainn Wilson, from The Office, about going to a climate event with King Charles and getting some advice there. I think it was 25 and 3, which was 20 minutes a day outside. 5 days, five, I forget what the 5 was. I'll post in the chat. And then, like, at least 3 days a year where you're just outside, unplugged, without the screens, just being a being in nature. It was quite lovely.
yeah. I saw 2 moose, and as a flatlander in Florida, a moose sighting is never, that's not going to happen here. And they're so
Yeah.
massive.
They're
And
tall. They're so tall. They're incredibly tall.
yeah, I mean, I swam in a hot spring. It was just beautiful. And I agree 100%. Get a little nature. Don't doom scroll all day. The doom will be there. It'll wait for you. You don't have to go out and find it. But yeah. So what should we talk about today? Where do we even begin? How about if we could begin with Jimmy Kimmel? Oh, you're on mute, Lisa. Or God is taking your voice.
Yes, I know it provides an endless array of comic opportunities. Anyway, yes, the as you speak, let it be. There's Kimmel
Yes.
as the first topic. Do you want to start? I'm gonna.
I will. Yeah, are you going to do the timer?
Yes, I'll hit.
Okay. Even though we are not slaves to the timer, it is good to at least use the form. Okay. So Jimmy Kimmel, as everybody knows, was removed indefinitely from the air by ABC under pressure from the FCC, and it created a massive backlash. So much, so that there were, not only did all of the late night hosts line up behind him, Sarah McLachlan refused to do the Lilith Fair. Lots of people, and frankly, on both sides of the aisle, spoke out. But the other thing, and I think one of the most important things that happened, was that people began en masse canceling their Disney, Hulu, subscriptions, and they were canceling so rapidly that the system crashed repeatedly. And so and it became clear that the executives who made this decision could not actually make the case that he had said anything that was out of bounds. And understand, this was happening in the same week that a Fox News host had, not jokingly, but in an angry rant, said that homeless people should be given lethal injections, and he wasn't taken off the air. And so there was in this aftermath, in this moment, a lot of people sort of coming to grips with just how far and how unhinged this effort to eliminate all detractors, and just how much it's right out of the authoritarian playbook to go after the comedians. And there are two things I just want to spotlight. Jimmy Kimmel began his show using the same line that Jack Parr had used when he had been removed from the air in the 60s. As I was saying before I was interrupted, Jack Parr said it back then. Jimmy Kimmel started his show. And to his credit, he went ahead and doubled down on his critique of Trump. He included in his remarks that this had backfired bigly on Trump, so much so that he might have to release the Epstein files to distract people from his embarrassment here. But the thing that I think we should all be thinking about is not this first show, but what will the next show and the next show sound like? Will he continue to be fearless? On this episode, when he returned, I think it got 6.3 million views. It smashed all kinds of records. But there's an author named Ada Palmer, and she's a historian and a futurist. And she said, what people misunderstand about censorship is that it is not intended to eliminate the thing that already exists. So when you censor a book, as Florida and Ron DeSantis love to do, that book flies off the shelf. They sell more than they ever had, right? Kimmel gets suspended and comes back to the highest ratings he's ever seen. They don't actually think that it will stop a thing that already exists. What their intention is to stop the next thing, to stop the next joke, to stop the next book from being published, to stop the next show from being produced. And that is the place, when the Pope, oh gosh, help me out here. The sun, that we orbit around the sun.
Oh, yes. When the challenge between Galileo and Copernicus.
Yes. And so even though the intention of that was to make all scientists, all writers, all philosophers think twice about what they wrote subsequently. And that is the acid test about whether or not Trump's censorship, whether the FCC's signaling that they are willing to go after stations and deny them whatever it is they're asking for, mergers, purchases of other, media outlets. The acid test wasn't last night. It's whether or not we see them gradually back off, slowly capitulate so as never to be in that hot seat again.
Yeah. I mean, that is a really wise observation, as always, Nadine, because it's yesterday, it's today, it's the next day. And the intention is to chill speech, which is actually, interestingly enough, one of the standards for before this Supreme Court, I guess, gets a hold of it. One of the standards for whether something infringes on the exercise of a right is whether the action of the government chills the exercise of that right. When the action of the government makes people not engage in that right. And in this instance, it's just been a shocking array of thuggery. Trump's statements today, criticizing the fact that Kimmel was back on the air and all of his nonsense barbs, baseless barbs about Kimmel's talent coming from one of the most talentless, humorless people ever, is quite astonishing. But it is the case that we are living in this period where it could even be a question whether the president and his head of the FCC have the power or the right to do this. Brendan Carr, who is Trump's choice for the FCC, was acting like a thug, quite frankly, in my opinion, on one of these podcasts, saying, we told ABC they could do, in essence, they could do it the hard way or the easy way. They could, basically get rid of Kimmel or not, and then try to walk back, some of those comments. But in reality, that's the message they've been sending. Do you want to earn the fear or favor of Trump? Do you want to earn the favor of Trump or be put to fear because if Trump doesn't like what you said? And the contrast, as you point out, between the comments that Kimmel made, which were really about how the Trump administration was exploiting the shooting of Charlie Kirk, not about Kirk himself. And in fact, Kimmel said that he had reached out to the family to send his mourning and sorrow for their loss, but he was observing about how this administration was trying to weaponize this murder. And that came at the same week that, as you point out, a major Fox infotainment host literally called for the summary execution of homeless people unhoused in America. And there was no threat from Brendan Carr and Donald Trump that Fox should have its license revoked for peddling such an immoral claim. Not that would be appropriate. It wouldn't be appropriate because under longstanding First Amendment law, the government is not supposed to be engaged in viewpoint discrimination. It's not supposed to pick and choose which views are acceptable. Licenses aren't supposed to hinge on that. There's a process for if there were, an F word used on live television, there is a process for fines that has been in place for a long time. But the idea that any president, and someone that he appointed to a job at the FCC to be a manager of the communications regulatory system somehow gets to threaten a station is outlandish. But we are in a place where now we have these mergers that have been happening and this conglomeration of these corporations where news and the protection of the freedom of the press is not their first goal. Their goal is to maximize profits, maximize their ability to merge, expand their size, their girth, their assets, their profits, and they're willing to sacrifice news, whether it's CBS News, CBS and 60 Minutes and the interference that CBS allowed as part of the dirty deal, in my view, to get that merger through. A merger that if we had an actual antitrust department in this country, maybe there would be some concern about the types of mergers that are going on. But instead, you have this desire to curry favor. And then you have these other billionaires, like the guy who, one of these other big computer IT, tech guys, who now wants to own even more of the media properties. And so, our freedom of press should not depend on whether some corporation is led by and controlled by some super rich dude who's hanging out at Mar-a-Lago or not.
Absolutely. It's also a reminder that conservatives hate satire because it punches through the myth of them as strongmen. It is not an accident that Mussolini and Putin, you name it, locked up comedians and satirists first. And I think the best way for us to continue to apply this pressure is to use more satire and to poke more fun and to be relentless in doing so. I think it was Pete Buttigieg who wrote, who posted recently, they are not as strong as they project themselves to be. And we are stronger than they would have us believe. And I think that is part of what I had some hope watching all of the forces arraying to push for Kimmel to be back on the air, but more than that, really laying out why freedom of expression has to exist, or there is no hope whatsoever for democracy.
Yeah. And, I'm, I guess I would say that, in the face of this or in the aftermath of this, to see some of these right-wing outlets like the New York Post continue to attack Kimmel, claiming that he didn't apologize. Brett Meiselas, who leads, Midas Touch, talked about, and I'll just quote him from his tweet, ex-tweet. He says, "What really bothers me is anyone who watched the show, how ridiculous his framing is. Kimmel's monologue was not only funny, but it featured a genuine and emotional outreach to people who have different views than him. But the New York Post and these right-wing accounts don't want people to hear this unifying message. It's a threat to them because they're merchants of hate." And I think that's sadly true, that we have some of these people who've gotten so rich in this social media moment have gotten rich basically on the heroin of hate, on pushing those messages, in particular right-wing messages, but also trying to inflame people in all sorts of ways. So for the New York Post, which is often has garbage headlines, in my personal view, that's my opinion, I'm entitled to it, and now and forever, I guess, regardless of what happens. But the fact is that, even in response to what Kimmel said last night, to the Kirk family and beyond, you still have this sort of right wing, ratcheting machine trying to keep people on the right in the dark about what really happened, what people really said, which does lead me to our next topic, which is about the United Nations and how unhinged Trump was at the United Nations. And then I've been watching how Fox has covered it versus the reality. I actually, I should tell you, I suppose I confess, I don't watch a lot of Trump live because it literally hurts my ears to hear just garbage, in a persistent 1 minute by minute way. But he gave an extremely long speech. I'm sure the people who were stuck in that room thought it was also an extremely long speech. It totaled something like 56 minutes, just right under the wire of 1 hour. And I think it actually may go down in history as one of the most deceitful speeches. Well, certainly will go down in history as one of the most deceitful speeches ever given by an American representative. Although, unfortunately, Colin Powell.
I was going to say, Colin Powell's going to be right up there.
Yeah, well, he's given the speech.
It was the pettiest.
Yeah,
it was the pettiest for sure. Though.
Yeah, the pettiest. Yeah.
I mean, and everyone has to understand that the escalator broke right on his way up with Melania, and it turns out it was somebody in his crew who triggered the escalator stopping, although he was convinced at the time that he was being sabotaged. And then I think his teleprompter didn't work, which that's always going to be a high wire act when he's allowed to just free associate, and free associate he did. I mean, yeah. He declared he was ending wars that didn't exist. He complained bitterly and out of nowhere that years ago he didn't get a contract to remodel the UN, and was still carrying the grudge that he wasn't able to,
add more gold and gilt and
tacky
crap
gold trim all over, vomit that all over the building. He attacked immigrants, used the phrase poisoning the blood, just fascist rhetoric. And, it was appalling, and it was a car wreck that you couldn't look away from.
Yeah, I did do some looking at the actual excerpts of the speech, and it was like Mussolini without the hat. It just really, yeah, that's saying something. But it's embarrassing actually. I know that so many other people around the world are shocked that the American people somehow elected Trump again. Like, we needed more of this deceitful, made up fantasy land dystopian stuff at the helm of a leading nuclear power in the world. But it's possible some people had hoped that maybe the second time he'd learned something the first time. And unfortunately, I think in part because of the U.S. Supreme Court emboldening him and enabling him, he seems even more unhinged than before, even more untethered to the facts, even more untethered to the law and longstanding law. And I haven't done a comprehensive comparison, but I suspect that the coverage in other countries was far more accurate about just how appalling that speech was than most Americans even heard about, whether it was on their TV news from Nexstar or Sinclair Broadcasting or Fox or even some of the other outlets that didn't cover it for the just debacle that his remarks were, how insulting his remarks were for other countries, telling them that they're going to go to hell, just outright lies about climate change, denial about climate change. It was a tour de force of nonsense.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we're seeing now, we saw it with Stephen Miller at the Charlie Kirk Memorial, that the Nazi rhetoric is not subtle. It's not coded. It's not a dog whistle. It's a foghorn. Stephen Miller just basically did a Melania, the way Melania stole the Michelle Obama speech and just barely reworked it. He took, was a Goebbels speech. I mean, and you do a side-by-side comparison and you go, they are not being subtle at all. They want you to see what they are doing. And, what is clear is that democracy means nothing to them. You've seen this rhetorical sleight of hand where they stop talking about democracy. It's not a democracy, it's a republic. And it's the effort to distance us further from the idea and move us closer to accepting dictatorship by moving us further from the concept of democracy. And, it is a republic and a democracy at the same time, but the rhetorical function of republic is not to be more accurate. It functions to denigrate the idea that one person, one vote matters, and to move it closer and closer to, they would fully accept a world run by the billionaires they worship before any other god. And so that's why when we go, these values that we're supposed to hold dear, freedom of speech, the one person, one vote, nobody above the law, those are just inconveniences in the thing that they're trying to build. So it's not shocking that in his second term, Trump is doing what he is doing. He's learned very well to abandon completely even any homage to those values, any pretense that he upholds them. In the same way, all of this Second Amendment, homosexuals who cannot stop talking about the Second Amendment and couldn't care less about the First or any of the others, always claiming that they need it because, we got to be able to defend ourselves against a government that has gone rogue. Well, here we are with a government gone rogue, deploying troops, the U.S. military into the streets against citizens, and they are nowhere to be seen except cheering from the peanut gallery. So,
I mean, and then there's the whole notion that masks that were an initial prescription to protect us from spreading a deadly disease were somehow un-American, but masked law enforcement officers seizing people off the streets. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly okay. I mean, it is also just the way they move the so-called Overton window with Lindsey Graham, a lackey who must be compromised in some ways that we can't even imagine.
Oh, I think we imagine pretty well.
Talking about how he would embrace a third term for Trump, notwithstanding the constitutional limitation on president serving more than 2 terms as president. This whole notion that the Trumpists, the MAGA, cares about the rule of law at all. They apparently don't, whether it's a senator like Lindsey Graham or someone else who is just willing to say anything, do anything to suck up to Trump, to maybe not be exposed, to have access to power, this array of motivations. But it's appalling. And it was already embarrassing, a lot of the things that Trump has been saying and the things that he's been doing in terms of just trashing legal traditions and rules and regulations and contracts and, traditions. But then that speech at the UN was just I think it's going to go down in history as one of the worst moments for America in the modern era in terms of its international credibility, respect-worthiness. It's really, it was just really stunning. It was stunningly bad. And it reminded me, I wonder who writes some of those speeches for him and how much they are, how familiar they are with the Goebbels playbook. But, also this past week, the commission that has been put together to plan for the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence fired the delegate that Trump had assigned to it, this important moment in American history. And he assigned a 25-year-old guy who was an intern in the last, 4 months before the election in 2020. Like someone who has who was a Fox producer. That was his other job. It's a real job. He was a producer, but some dude with, not the credentials to actually be in charge of helping to coordinate an event marking this American moment, not just Trump's moment or something about Trump. And so, they bounced him. We'll see what happens next. But I was just appalled that he would put someone so inexperienced into such an important role. But of course, I shouldn't be shocked.
You shouldn't be. No. Yes, it's never about who's competent. It's always about who will be a stooge for what they want. Who will, you see Brendan Carr before Trump was talking about how important the First Amendment is. Now Brendan Carr has a little golden pin of Trump's profile on his lapel, and he's throwing his weight around, the weight of the FCC in service. And one of the things, before we go to the next conversation about corruption, one of the things that is always amusing to me is that Trump can never get on the right page. Like the moment that the backlash to what ABC had done began to hit, Carr was like, we never said that. We were just talking about how bad his ratings were. We weren't calling on him to be fired. But Trump couldn't help himself. Like he couldn't get on the same page and was like, yeah, he needs to be gone. And we're going after these other ones. And we're going after this Australian reporter. And so it doesn't matter who's writing for him. He's going to say the thing that is actually what they're up to because he can't help himself.
Yeah.
And speaking of not being able to help himself, bag o' cash.
Yeah.
Why don't you kick us off on that one?
Yeah, so I was astonished to read, among the many astonishing things that have been out in the world lately, that there was an FBI investigation during the Biden administration that was focused on bribery and uncovering bribery. It wasn't focused on former Trump officials or former future Trump officials. It was focused on this question of contracts for DHS and this is a massively lucrative business, this business of lockup quotas, basically, of getting money to detain people. And so there was a predicate for that investigation. They were looking into people trying to get contracts, hugely lucrative contracts for detention during the Biden administration. And lo and behold, according to the sources that spoke with Carol Leonnig and then as reported on MSNBC and other outlets, Tom Homan, who is the border czar for Trump, was chosen by him after the election, had been campaigning for him, was caught on tape, apparently, receiving $50,000 cash to possibly help with getting a contract. There's a letter from the House Democrats asking for the Judiciary Committee Democrats asking for the release of the FBI recordings of the $50,000 cash, what they call bribe, that Homan may have received to steer future government contracts to people who gave him cash. And then in this administration, it turns out that Pam Bondi, Trump's former defense attorney during the impeachment trial, and current defense attorney being paid by us to act as the attorney general, basically dismissed the effort to pursue this case against Tom Homan. And so Democrats are rightly calling for the release of those materials because basically anyone just receiving $50,000 cash, if they are former government official, potential future government official, that's worthy of investigation. And that's notwithstanding what the John Roberts court did in a case a couple of years ago, in which it basically said, outlandishly, this was 2 years ago now, I guess, that a public official could receive a gratuity for a job well done. There's no indication that in 2024 Tom Homan was receiving a gratuity, a tip for a job well done. The indications are that this was a legitimate, real deal, real world investigation into corruption, public corruption, and Tom Homan wandered into the, onto the audio or video and accepted cash. That's the allegation, and if it's proven to be true, if there's a way to show what happened for the people to see it, it's dirty. It's not something that former or current or future officials should be engaged in. And I hope we get to the bottom of it. But with Pam Bondi at the helm of the Justice Department and Kash Patel over at FBI, who knows whether they'll ever release that, or whether somehow that tape will disappear or be disappeared or be cleansed or have a minute missing. I don't know, whatever the last trigger was in the Epstein video. Like, who knows what will happen to the evidence? But the reporting indicates that it was caught digitally, and it was very damning or troubling. Of course, he's denied any wrongdoing. There's been no charge, but I would say this is one of those cases of where there's smoke, there sure looks like there's fire, or at least there's audio that people have a right to see when you have someone playing such a significant role, especially after Trump's big billionaire bailout bill, potentially directing billion-dollar contracts to people to detain immigrants in this country. So that's my windup. Yeah. And I forgot to set the timer, so I'm going to make it shorter.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think there's two things to consider. One is that bribes are so routine that it wouldn't occur to him not to wander into the frame. It's just not a thing to concern himself with, because it is so routine. And we see in Florida, where the governor, created a state of emergency that allowed him to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in creating a concentration camp in the Everglades on environmentally sensitive land, with shoddy construction as we head into, the height of hurricane season. And now comes word that something like a third of the inmates cannot be found. And these are no bid contracts with people who do not have experience in building these kinds of facilities, because why would they have experience doing this? And when representatives, state lawmakers have a legal right to inspect any detention facility in the state, and they had to fight their way in, but they talked about overflowing toilets, standing water on the ground, one person yelling, "I'm an American." I mean, and none of this is approved by any other legislative body. And so they put themselves in a position where they can disperse hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars with no oversight. And this is the same administration that is entangled in another scandal about their Hope Foundation and the money, how the money was used there. So this is a racket, and it's a lucrative one. And I think when you've been running this racket for so long, you get sloppy. But an attorney general who did not pursue when she was attorney general in the state of Florida, and will not pursue as attorney general for the nation, charges against an international ring of high-profile pedophiles. What are the chances that she's going to pursue anything over a $50,000 bribe? And so I think what it points to is the absolute lack of confidence whatsoever in the Department of Justice, the FBI, any of the law enforcement apparatus in the country that has been bent to Trump's will. We saw it in the post that he made to Pam Bondi that some people think was intended to be a DM, but he made it quite public, saying, "Go after these people. I'm firing the guy, my former appointees, because they're not coming up with the evidence. You can do it." All of this is a message, to the American people that this is no longer a dispassionate legal, law enforcement arm. This is a part of the vengeance machinery of Donald Trump. And so it is not surprising that in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, that you know Candace Owen has really sort of made her reinvented herself as somebody who is calling out inconsistencies in their investigation. I have to admit, she did this whole Shakespearean version of the Discord exchange that supposedly came from Tyler Robinson to his roommate, and it was pretty hilarious. So I don't know that I can forgive this administration for many things, and among them are me watching Candace Owen, but also having to listen to Ted Cruz do his mob boss impersonation. If you haven't heard that, I encourage you to Google it. It is, even though he is landing on the right side of the issue about free speech, it is such a, it is such a, it created such an involuntary convulsion of cringe within my body that I can never forgive. I can never forgive ABC for putting me through that.
Well, I have to say, Candace Owen, just to have seen the types of claims she's made over the years is and gotten very rich, in the process. Just it's cringe. It's cringy to me, but also just on a side note, the fact that she has been maligning the First Lady of France and the trial is going forward with defamation. Like it's so really it's sort of a sign of how far the right wing is sort of off the center of common sense. Like this idea of people who make extreme claims getting rewarded. And even like just this week, there was a report that one of the people that Trump tried to install, the person he tried to install as the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, I'm not going to name his name because I don't even want to give him credit by saying his name, but he actually wrote a letter basically complaining about the fact that an FBI agent had been aiding the families of the children who were murdered at Newtown and wanted to investigate this government official for helping the families, someone who was maligned by Alex Jones. And then you had Alex Jones, who was subject to a legitimate finding against him for just outrageous and grievous defamation against these families and also against this particular agent, who I think was one of the first people on the scene, if I recall correctly. But the nexus between Alex Jones, who should not be left with a penny of his various shell companies that he tried to maneuver his money through to avoid liability for attacking these families who lost their grade school children in that gun massacre. And to have someone at the helm of the Justice Department aiding Alex Jones in trying to harass, like, it's just like every day there's some new horrible thing that this administration does, often coming out of the Justice Department or tied to the Justice Department, that is untethered to reality and is legitimately morally repugnant.
Yeah, that's why them lecturing people about responding to Charlie Kirk's assassination is just complete garbage. This is the first time they've given a damn about a campus shooting. And it is possible and necessary to condemn the violence that claimed his life as we have condemned all of the campus shootings, whether it was Sandy Hook or this campus in Utah. But to canonize Charlie Kirk after is something that cannot be permitted. And we are seeing, I said, listen, I'm not going to say anything. This is a tragedy. It's a horrible harbinger of where we are, and no good comes from this. And it is it is a stain on the soul of our country that this kind of violence is pervasive, whether it's Uvalde or Charlie Kirk. But to watch them attempt to rewrite history and whitewash his legacy, read the things that Charlie Kirk said about George Floyd in the aftermath of his death to see the depth of the hypocrisy. We do not have to rewrite history, and you can lament the circumstances of his death and the what it says about our country, and still call out the fact that what he pushed was racist and sexist and bigoted and anti-LGBT. And I don't think that I mean, if he were alive, he didn't dispute these things. He didn't dispute the things he said about the Civil Rights Act being a mistake, or what he said about black pilots, calling black women moronic. You know, all of these things. He would have stood by them. And yet, people are losing their job for accurately quoting him. And I've seen on my social media where I will say, listen, it's terrible, the circumstances of his death, and this is the truth of the things that he said, because I'm watching this rewriting. They're like, oh, show us proof. Okay, well, here's some quotes. Oh, you've taken them out of context. Provide the context that you think is missing, and then crickets. So it is, just to go back to Kimmel for a moment, this is the place where that is the acid test of whether or not we will continue to say both of these things, or feel as though we can only talk about how horrific gun violence that has claimed yet another life is, but we can't talk about, the way somebody dies does not absolve the way they lived and the things that they have put in motion that have done real harm. So I think that I don't know if this is an easy segue, but one of the things that I think is really important is that we not allow all of the things that Trump is doing, his Tylenol, anti-Tylenol rant, the RFK Jr. press conference on autism, Dr. Oz, speaking out in favor of a drug that would directly benefit the company that he is most associated with. All of these things. What I have loved is how people are responding by talking about how Tylenol is being used to distract us from the release of the Epstein files.
Yep. And, my favorite meme from today was acetaminophen. How do you pronounce it? Release the Epstein files.
Yes. Exactly. And I love that people are refusing to allow these this to distract from the fact that they continue to minimize what is clearly, a scandal that reaches to the highest level. And without a doubt, we all know Trump's in those files. We all know Trump is all over those files. And
one of the things when I was writing that piece for Grave Injustice a couple weeks ago was, when they had the before Epstein died in jail and before Maxwell was sentenced, they didn't actually go back and do an investigation of everything that happened from 2006 or 2007 forward. They were focused on the material that they had from that initial investigation, which was the period in which Donald Trump was still hanging out with Epstein, in which they were still partying together, in which he was still, traveling with him some of the time. And so it wasn't like the crimes that Maxwell was convicted of happened in, 2015, 16 or 17. We don't know what they did after that 2007 plea agreement in terms of how they may have changed their operations or what they were doing. But there seems to be little doubt that they were continuing to exploit young girls and women. But the criminal charges were all from 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, which was the period where Epstein was still a member of Mar-a-Lago, was, back in 2000, supposedly stealing Virginia from the club, which her family rightfully objected to. And Trump knew that she had been poached, in essence, by Maxwell and GHISLAINE. And the other part of this, that happened in the past week or so since we last met up, Nadine, was Kash Patel was testifying before the Senate and then the House, and he basically said part of what he said was that the original sin was that Alex Acosta cut that plea agreement with Epstein back in 2006, 2007, and that was the so-called original sin. And then Acosta appeared before the House in a closed session. And the Democrats said he showed no remorse. The Republicans issued some statement saying, he was very clear about what happened or didn't happen, asserting that there wasn't much of a case, when in fact, the case was very strong. There was a credible young woman who came with her family to the police in South Florida, described what had happened to her, how she'd been recruited, what Epstein did. This led to an array of other people being identified, other young girls and women being identified who've been preyed upon by Maxwell and Epstein. And that it was those statements that were the foundation for the sentencing document for Maxwell. And so this notion that Acosta claims there wasn't much of a case, and so that's why he agreed to let Epstein plead guilty to solicitation of prostitution. That's not actually what the record shows. What the record shows was that the police and the FBI had built a substantial case against Epstein and then Maxwell by proxy, although she wasn't charged in that initial indictment. And that those were the facts that the jury in New York heard and convicted Maxwell of these crimes. And these were the facts that the judge heard and ordered a more than 20-year sentence for Maxwell that Trump and his proxies in Pam Bondi and her deputy have taken upon themselves to give relief to Maxwell, put her in a sort of country club federal detention center, as part of the deal of her basically saying on the tape that Trump was a perfect gentleman. So, that we cannot let them get away with this. And as you point out, Nadine, Bondi told Trump himself in May that his name appears numerous times in these files. And then she went on TV and said, basically, what files? What clients? What's happening? And I will say, Alex Acosta is someone who I first encountered. I think I mentioned this before. I talk about this in the book. I first encountered his handiwork back in the 1990s because he was working with C. Boyd and Gray, one of these tobacco heirs, to try to block Clinton's judicial nominees to the district court and circuit court. And then he parlayed that experience, which was just basically being an operative, into being the second in command in the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. He wasn't qualified, in my personal opinion, to be the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. I wouldn't have hired him for a civil rights case. I wouldn't have hired him for a dog bite case. He had almost no relevant experience in anything. Then he sort of fell up to become the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of Florida. And from that post, just a year or two into it, with no legitimate experience, in my view, no prosecutorial experience, no serious litigation chops, just, right-wing operatives, sort of like a precursor to Trump's choosing loyalists, people who do not have the wide esteem of their colleagues for the important positions. He was in that cut from that same cloth. He cut this deal with a sex trafficker for a slap on the wrist. So Acosta should be held accountable for that in the social arena in terms of, just having his name associated with that deal. But also this effort to deflect to Acosta is an effort to deflect away from Trump and what Trump has been doing through his operatives at the Justice Department to try to give Maxwell a break and possibly lay the foundation for commuting her sentence or pardoning her.
Right. And he's already permitted her to move into a facility that is supposed to be off limits to a cushier set of circumstances that's supposed to be off limits to people who sexually abuse children.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing that. I think there was an effort to begin to recast her as a victim through Trump's loyalists in the blogosphere, but it has not worked. In fact, there are MAGA bloggers who are even today, doubling down on the idea that failure to release the Epstein files could cost us the majority. And they're the people telling the president he could stop the legislation that would compel the release of these files, have given him terrible advice. There was just an election. Was it in Arizona? There was just an election that tips the balance and puts back on the table the possibility of forcing the release of these files. And according to I subscribe to a bunch of right-wing newsletters. I like to see what they are saying, hear what they are spinning, and many of them in the MAGA movement are responding with outrage and upset since last July, that his desire to dismiss this, and who are these? I can't remember what he called them, wackos, who are still. Are you still talking about that? People are not letting it go. So I hope that the bipartisan pushback against censorship of Jimmy Kimmel and the bipartisan push to release these files finally will hold in such a way that we will continue to see voters show up at the polls and Trump's numbers continue to crater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whew.
Okay. We're coming in to the top of the hour, and I just want to say again, there's yet another terrible decision by the John Roberts Court, another partisan decision, not a divided court, which some papers have tried to claim. Like, it's a Republican partisan majority that is continuing to overturn lower court judges in case after case, granting emergency relief to Donald Trump in his efforts, the latest one being his effort to fire someone from an independent commission and signal that this court may well reverse a legal precedent that's been on the books for almost 100 years that has protected the independence of agencies from the whims of presidents trying to fire people without cause in order to pack these commissions that have been created by Congress to be independent. And so we have yet another ruling by the Roberts Court. This may be the 19th or the 20th, where it has overruled a lower court restraining order against Trump. It's done so without a full opinion, without full oral argument, without full briefing, in the shadows. And it has done so again, putting not just a thumb, but another thumb, another hand, a fist on the scale of justice in favor of Trump, having the mistaken notion under our Constitution that he can do no wrong, that he can do whatever he wants. This Roberts Court has paved the way for Trump's return through that outlandish, unprecedented immunity decision last year, and it has been acting like a political, group on steroids, using the Supreme Court to basically aid Trump at almost every turn for the past 8 months now. And so, I just wanted to flag that. And it is a segue into
our last segment, our glass half full. And I hope everyone will, pour a little bit of your favorite beverage, because we are at our final segment. And, one of the things that's important when you're fighting tyranny is to have clear thinkers who can lay out the challenges that we face, expose the infrastructure that threatens our democracy. And we are fortunate that we have just such a person as the co-host of the 5, 8 and a half. Lisa Graves' new book is out. Lisa, let's see. Can you model it for us?
It's so okay. So it actually is in bookstores on September 30th. It's available for pre-order now. It just arrived at my house this afternoon. I can't tell you how excited I am about it. It's in hardcover. It's got the fabulous blurbs from Senator Whitehouse and Jane Mayer and Nancy McLean on the back. It's got everything I think you need to know that you may not know already about John Roberts and how he crafted the image of himself as a fair umpire and has behaved, as the Guardian put it, like the umpire that chose a side. So the game, cooking the game before the game even starts. And so I'm so excited that you agreed, Nadine, to let this be our glass half full. I've never written a book before. It was a labor of love. I was asked by one of the editors of Bold Type Press about 2 years ago whether I would consider writing a book. I said I would. We talked about what to do. After a lot of back and forth, I ended up with a contract last spring to write this book. I wrote it from August through December of last year with a little update in January about my predictions for what this court was going to do to continue to aid Trump. I'm sorry to say they have basically come true. But there's also reform, ideas about reform in this book. And so it has some real positive notes. And I'm excited that I finished it. I'm excited that they accepted it. I'm excited that it's published. I'm excited that it came to my house today in a little box so that I could actually hold it in my hands. And I'm excited to share it with you all tonight as a glass half full for me. I don't often stop to celebrate breakthroughs or successes. I'm determined to do more of that, but this is indeed a really proud moment, and I'm glad to share it with you all.
Well, we are thrilled, and you have been exposing Roberts for quite a long time, and I see that people are already pre-ordering, and perhaps we can create an opportunity. We were talking about the possibility of an in-person gathering,
Yes.
sort of like the one that happened in New York around the holidays. But congratulations and thank you for shining a spotlight on a broken system so that we can see the contours and figure out how we are going to fix what has been broken. So to your new book, we raise our glass. Cheers to everybody.
Cheers, cheers.
Mm-hmm. So that is the glass half full, not to ignore what's broken, but to remind ourselves that there's still things that are beautiful, still things that are bold, still things that are possible, and also to say thank you. I'm Nadine Smith with Lisa Graves. Take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for making space in your calendar for the 5, 8 and a half, your midweek breather. Take care of yourselves and tune in on Friday for the 5, 8, and we will see you next Wednesday at 8. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.